Hello, welcome to the League of Women Voters combined legislative interviews for Senate District 41 and House Districts 41A and 41B. My name is Bruce Pomerantz. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, Anoka, Blaine, Coon Rapids area, or LWV ABC for short. By living in Fridley, I am located in Minnesota, Senate District 41 and House District 41A. My companion, Laura Oberle, also lives in Fridley. Serving her first term representing Senate District 41 is Senator Mary Kunesh. She serves on the Senate Education, Finance, and Policy Committee, Senate Mining and Forestry Committee, and Senate Redistricting Committee. Previously, she served 2-year terms in 2016 and 2018, representing House District 41B. Representative Connie Bernardy has served 8 non-consecutive terms representing House District 41A. She is the House Higher Education and Finance Committee Chair and also serves on the House Transportation, Finance and Policy Committee and House Ways and Means Committee. Representative Sandra Feist represents House District 41B for the first time. She serves on 4 House committees: Education Finance Committee, Education Policy Committee, Judiciary Finance and Civil Law Committee, and Public Safety and Criminal Justice Reform Finance and Policy Committee. All 3 are members of the Democrat Party. Due to the need to alter district boundaries based on the 2020 census, elections for state legislative offices will occur this November, as well as elections for the 5 executive branch officers: Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, and State Auditor. Legislators, thank you for accepting our request to discuss the upcoming legislative session today, especially when all 3 of you are busily preparing for the legislative session that begins this Monday, January 31st. Viewers, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any government level. The League does take positions on issues and legislation. This legislative interview is one of several ways that the League fulfills its 100-year-old mission of promoting informed and active participation in government by all residents. Except for voting and serving in office, which is restricted to citizens, all residents can become politically involved. If you are interested in becoming a League member or want more information, visit our website at LWVABCMN.org. Please inform any young adults that we encourage them to join, regardless of voting eligibility due to age or citizenship. As I said, I and my ABC colleague, Laura Oberle, live in Fridley, and we compiled questions from those submitted by the public through the LWV ABC website, in addition to those supplied by the state LWV Minnesota office. We combined similar questions or rephrased them for succinctness. We provided the selected questions to the legislators in advance. If we do not include your question in this interview, or if you have questions that arise from the legislators' responses, as always, you have the ability to commute directly to them. Their email addresses and office phone numbers are available at the state legislative website. Enter Minnesota Legislature in your browser and link to the legislature's website, which will appear at or near the top of the list that you receive. Once at the website, you can navigate to any legislator's contact information. Now, legislators, we're going to begin our interview. Except for the first question, I'll rotate who is first to answer the question. Then as a conversation, I'll ask the 2 other legislators if they wish to add to their colleague's response, especially if either of you intend to take any action during the legislative session concerning the question's topic. Your answers to the first question will be unique among you. Senator Bernardy, you lead the alphabet with your last name and also have the seniority in years served. So we'll start with you. What are your top 3 policy priorities for the legislative session? Please be specific as to why those are your priorities and what legislation you plan to introduce or support.
Well, Bruce, thank you for that introduction. And I just want to point out, to make a correction. I hate to do that to the moderator, but I'm Representative Connie Bernardy. And if you want to start with the senator, which oftentimes we do, then you can start with Senator Kunesh, but I just want to do clarification for that, and I hope you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, so how would you like to handle it, Bruce? It's your call. You're the facilitator.
Senator Kunesh, then would you like to start? I want to defer to protocol.
Thank you. I'd be happy to start and appreciate this opportunity, Bruce and Laura, and those of you behind the scenes that are bringing this information and sort of transparency to our constituents. I'm Mary Kunesh, and I'm the state senator here in District 41. It was 4 years that I sat in the House, and during that time, I sat on the Education, Finance, and Policy committees. As an educator for 25 years, I feel like I bring a really unique view to education. And so my first, one of my top 3 priorities is to really address some of, well, there's a plethora of issues within the education as we navigate through the pandemic, and then how are we going to kind of get everything back on track, right? So I think every Minnesotan can agree that every one of our students, pre-K through post-secondary, deserve the very best education with high quality licensed teachers who reflect the growing diversities of our students and of our communities. Our schools have been woefully, terribly underfunded for decades and decades, and probably forever. And so I am going to support legislation that really works towards fully funding the urgent needs right now during the pandemic times, and then putting resources where they have the best outcome for our students in the future. So we have to be willing to kind of think outside of our traditional system for innovation and always keep our mind on success. So one example, in the House, for the 4 years I was there, I carried the Increased Teachers of Color and Indigenous Act. It's a full comprehensive bill that starts with recruiting teachers and teachers of color, helping them through the process of licensure, especially during student teaching when they aren't able, when they're at schools full-time like a regular teacher and not able to do regular jobs, which was a huge struggle for me as a single mom. And then helping them, supporting them with mentors to stay in their position as a teacher, because we know that most teachers burn out within those first 4 or 5 years. But I had a wonderful mentor. And if it wasn't for her, I could easily have been one of those that thought, you know what, I'm gonna look for something else. So we want to retain them. And then once they have established themselves as, in the classroom and feeling confident with their profession, how can we get them to mentor others and continue that mentoring? So that's the full comprehensive legislation. We've gotten bits and pieces of it, but we really need the full package in order to make it 100% successful. I really love that the governor is looking to fully fund providing food for students during their hours at school. I've seen firsthand how hard it is for a kid that comes to school hungry, how hard it is for them to keep a good attitude and pay attention and those sort of things. I think it's really important that with the surplus, we seriously address the cross subsidy in special education, EL, English as a second language. And for a lot of our community schools out in greater Minnesota, the cost of transportation affects what happens in the classroom. because the cost for them is, you know, so much more than our urban or suburban schools. And so all of those put stressors on our school system, and certainly want to address those sort of things. I also sit on forestry and mining. So I'm the DFL lead in that district, in that committee. So climate change is a real threat to the world, and even closer to home here in Minnesota. So I'm going to support legislation that moves us to a future that is sustainable for all Minnesotans, no matter where they live, and towards 100% clean energy by protecting our land and our air and our water for the next 7 generations. And then, of course, November is a big election year with our local, state, and federal elections. And there is no freedom more fundamental than the freedom to vote. And so I'm going to work to ensure voting rights for eligible voters, protecting Minnesota in-person early voting laws, and the option to vote by mail for all voters, no matter what the circumstances are. So I'd support making Election Day a federal holiday and restoring the right to vote to those that are convicted of felonies who have completed their prison time, and the use of the ranked choice options for all local government races. So those are some of my priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Representative Bernardy, would you like to, and should I always defer to Senator Kunesh for all the questions, or can I rotate them?
Yeah, you can. I'm sure she'd appreciate it if you rotated them.
Okay.
And but thank you. You can do this however you want, and I just so appreciate you. Yeah, I just want to make sure, whatever. So thank you for facilitating. So you read.
As a librarian who always had at least 80% percentage of women to men, I've learned to defer to women.
Oh, well, Bruce and Laura and everyone watching today, thank you so much for your involvement in the League of Women Voters. It's been an honor to be a part of the League. I participated at League of Women Voters back when Fridley had its own league way back when, and just amazing people that participate and really make sure that our democracy is brought to people and connecting us with the people in our district. So these are wonderful opportunities for us, and it reminds me of going door to door and meeting people at their doors. So thank you so much. So for the legislative session, first of all, I'm Connie Bernardy, and I represent the communities of New Brighton, Fridley, and Spring Lake Park, and have been representing Anoka County for starting my 16th year in the legislature. I've spanned 4 decades of living in Anoka County during my life, and it's certainly an honor to be here today. The legislation that I'll be focusing on this year really helps our community, and I'll just touch on like 3 different areas, and we're going to go into depth more about bonding in a little later, so I'll probably save that. But first of all, the area of education. I work closely with Columbia Heights School District, Fridley School District, Spring Lake Park School District, and we even have Anoka Hennepin School District in my district, and also the Mounds View School District. And one of the things that I have focused on is making sure our earliest learners have the opportunity to go to voluntary pre-K, no matter their ability to pay. And so we have 4,000 preschool spots, and a large number of them are in our community. And some of those spots need to be renewed every 2 years. And so I am focusing on getting that through again and making it permanent. We know that the investments in our earliest learners are so important. And I do want to thank Columbia Heights School District and Fridley School Districts for really helping me champion that initiative, as well as when I was chief officer of the bill for all-day kindergarten. The Columbia Heights School District and Fridley School District were instrumental on making the case how this is essential for our students and their learning. So thank you for that community support in doing that. And then I serve as a higher education chair in the Minnesota House. And we know that colleges and trade schools sometimes are are really difficult for affordability. And we have an unprecedented surplus on the horizon. And we are working to hopefully make an historic impact across the state for Minnesota students and their families. And so we're going to look to make college more affordable. We'll look to support the calls for tuition relief at our public colleges and university and trade school, which includes our trade schools, and expand the state grant program, which increases awards for students to be able to afford going to college. And then the other area is working on a number of students have had to put their dreams on hold, and we just want to make sure that they have the opportunity to carve out a new path for themselves or be able to get back on the on-ramp into college. And we're going to look at opportunities for tuition-free grants for students to be able to attend our two-year colleges, universities, and our technical schools. And then we need to find out, we're going to be focusing on ways to reduce the burden of the student debt that Minnesotans are facing by looking at refinancing and helping repay those off. So those are some of the things in the higher ed chair that will help our students and families in our community. And then the other area working on is affordable housing. In our area, we have a lot of our residents live in manufactured homes, and they are like the most affordable of affordable housing, and working on a comprehensive package to help our community be able to, and residents in their communities to be able to purchase in their the land that they live on through a co-op. And we have that in our community already, and work closely with them, and we want to expand that so that we can do that. And so it's called the opportunity to purchase. And there's nothing more vulnerable than owning your home, but not the land underneath it. And I'm working really hard to help make that happen. And there's a number of other things in the area of affordable housing that lies into that as well. And then in the area, I will say transportation. Many of you may have seen there's some new improvements going on in Central Avenue, Highway 65, and University Avenue. We're really working on trying to make it safer for people. And so we have a number of projects that are being implemented over time, and some big improvements are going to be happening in the near term. And so I will continue to work on making sure that people in our community can bike and walk safely and use the mode of transportation that works for them. And so that's another thing I'm working on. And I'll talk a little bit more about the bonding initiatives as that will help our community as we get further into this. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I'm looking forward to the input of our community. That's my number one favorite thing to do, is staying connected to my constituents and hearing from them. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Representative Feist, and please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Don't promote me, I'm new. I'm happy in the house. So hi everyone, I'm so excited to be here to share some thoughts with everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. So I'm a mom and an immigration attorney. And so a lot of the focus that I have this session is kind of focused on those kind of two spheres of my passions. I'm really passionate about education, supporting our schools and students, addressing the opportunity gap. And so two of my committees are in that realm. And then I'm also really passionate about improving our criminal legal systems. I'm looking at juvenile justice, looking at ways that our state laws can support immigrants. And so that's my other two committees. So this session, I've got kind of three main spheres that I'll be focused on. I'll ultimately kind of come down to our youth. So that first sphere is educational equity. And I'm working on several bills. I would say I've got my short term and then my long term. So on the short term, I'm looking at what can I get past this legislative session, working across the aisle. And I've actually got a couple of bills that I'm really excited about, where the stars align and the parties align. And so I'm really optimistic for this session. The first of those is called the Student Data Privacy Act. And that is a bipartisan bill that would bring our student data privacy laws from the 70s, when data was like a piece of paper in a locked filing cabinet, to the 21st century, where our data is in the cloud. It is with private companies. I just got a text from another mom who's got my daughter, so I'll text her back in a few minutes. It should be fine. Anyway, so yeah, so the Student Data Privacy Act is just a really important modernization of our student data privacy laws. It addresses also the way that we've seen schools increasingly use remote surveillance tools to monitor students, and that has led to disproportionate disciplinary action against kids of color and low-income kids. There are a lot of unintended consequences and the way that we are right now the unregulated use of this type of technology. So that is one of the bills I'm carrying. And another that is also bipartisan. And one of the reasons I'm here at the Capitol today is to send they're called the jackets, the bill over to the Senate. I'm working with a Republican Senate author to create universal Fafsa in Minnesota. And what this would do is require Fafsa completion for high school graduation. And it's been done in 7 other states, both blue and red, California and Alabama. Thought this was a good idea. And what it does is it just ensures that like all the kids who are eligible for these federal dollars to assist them to go to college receive that support, because we know that Minnesota is very low amongst the 50 states in FAFSA completion. And in the states that have passed this legislation, they've seen a dramatic increase in the amount of dollars that they receive from that state. And also that closely correlates with kids going on to college. And specifically, they've tracked the number of kids on free and reduced lunch who have gone to college, and it's been a real increase in the states that have taken this path. So I'm really excited and optimistic, cautiously optimistic, because politics are not very predictable, but about that bill, which I believe is a real educational equity bill that can actually pass this session. And the last educational bill I'll mention that I'm working on for this session and hope that it can pass is the period poverty bill. Right now, our schools do not provide free menstrual products to students in need. And we know that many students cannot afford these products and miss school as a result. And so they're falling behind. We're making other investments to try to catch them back up. And this would be a relatively small investment of, we call it $2 on the formula, or just under $2 million, to address that like really pervasive cause of absenteeism amongst half of our student body every year. So although it's a spending bill in education, which sometimes can be partisan, I believe that we can all come together and understand that if we're going to pay for toilet paper, we need to pay for menstrual products too. So that is on the education front. I'm also working very heavily in the youth justice realm. I am carrying a bill, well, I'm about to introduce a bill that I've been working on since last May with a lot of stakeholders, experts, prosecutors, community members, youth, to expand access to youth restorative justice statewide. And restorative justice is an alternative to the punitive sentencing process, you know, looking at kids who act out and then putting them in juvenile detention. We know that that statistically is going to lead to them committing more serious crimes a lot of the time. And it's dramatic in how it interrupts their education. And so working with all these experts, we've created a framework, and it's really bold. So my goal for this session is to introduce it and to have an informational hearing. This is a bill that is dramatic and would address racial justice in Minnesota in a really important way. And I want it to be bipartisan. And so we've had some talks already with colleagues across the aisle, and I'm sure that the informational hearing will have a lot of different opinions and perspectives. And so that's a long-term project. And the other youth justice bill I'm carrying, which I do have a Republican author in the Senate, is an immigration bill. And it would align state and federal law with respect to neglected, abandoned, or abused immigrant children. Because in immigration law, a child is under 21. Under state law, a child is under 18. And so we're just going to bring those two things in alignment and protect those kids who need our protection and should be entitled to this protection under federal law. And lastly, I'll just mention that as Senator Kunesh said, we need to invest in climate action. And I feel like this falls back in my mom bucket. Like I want my children to inherit the earth. I want their children to, if they have children, to hopefully inherit, you know, a thriving earth. So investments in clean energy infrastructure, in weatherization, we need to be making these bold investments and looking on, like Senator Kunesh said, like to the next 7 generations and beyond. So those are kind of my large priorities for the coming session. Thank you.
Okay. We have a request from one of the observers asking that if you have a bill name to something that you're going to introduce, and I don't think you get numbers until they're officially introduced, right? So if you have a bill name, please provide it so that people can track it as the legislature proceeds.
Could you, it might not be possible mid program, but would it be possible for you to open the chat so we can chat to everyone? Because then, oh, you know what? I just don't know how to read. I fixed it. I can chat to everyone. So yes, thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay, all right.
So you're going to put the bill name in the chat.
Yeah, I can put bill names. I'm sure we can all do that.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm taking notes, and it's sometimes hard to get it all.
And we can also follow up after this, Laura, and get some bill names to you, because that would be really helpful to have people be a part of these bills with us and helping to advocate and shape those. So that would be, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to do that.
Okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
Any other comments before I proceed? Okay. The next question which you have before you is, do you generally support Governor Walz's initial bonding construction proposals? And are there any bonding projects that you would extensively modify, oppose, or introduce? And Representative Feist, if you'll go first now.
Sure. I was just coordinating with that mom to make sure that my husband opens the door for our daughter when she gets home. That is done, and now I'm ready to focus again. So the question was about bonding, and was it the question about Governor Walz's proposals?
Right, and are there any that, do you generally support them, and are there any that you would extensively modify, oppose, or introduce?
Yeah, no, I was very excited by Governor Walz's proposals, and definitely am supportive. Some of the things that most excited me were the investments in historical society sites. That's hard to say. I went on a tour of Fort Snelling recently, and they really showed us all of the investments in updating some of the buildings and like helping to restore some of the original architecture, creating more sites for kind of meditation on the history of our state and of that site. And it's just, when I think about why I love Minnesota and why it's a place that I want to live and raise a family and build a career and build a business as a law firm owner, like it's stuff like that it's very indirect, but I feel like cumulatively it is so important to the fabric of our state and what makes it a place that people want to live and spend their lives. And so I was very excited about those types of investments. And I think that that's the exciting thing about bonding is we can really think far into the future and really large scale. I also think that the housing infrastructure and public housing rehabilitation specifically are really wise investments. One of the things that, I would have liked to have seen our housing budget last session be even bigger, because we know that housing is such an urgent issue right now because of the pandemic. It already was an urgent issue. It's made more urgent. More people are struggling with housing instability. And so I think those investments are just really important and exactly what the bonding process is for. I also was super excited about investment into early childhood facilities. Like Representative Bernardy said, this is like the most important thing that we can be investing our money in. Art Rolnick, the chair of the Minnesota Federal Reserve Bank back in the day, said for every dollar invested, you get a $17 return. And the first thing that I ever did as a political advocate was around early childhood education. So I think investment in those facilities is a really wise investment that will for sure pay dividends. If you can say that about kids, potential. And lastly, just that it was like $110 million just investing in our natural resources, looking at weatherization and planting trees and just thinking to that future and the natural resources that we want to pass on to future generations. So I'm really excited about it being a bonding year. It's my first bonding year, so I'll know what that means even better in a few months. But I think it's going to be a really good, important year for Minnesota.
Thank you. Senator Kunesh, would you please answer the question?
Yeah, I'm very excited. about Governor Walls's bonding proposal. I think that he has taken the time and used the resources, the human resources in our state, especially our bonding leads, very well to sort of come up with priorities around what we need to do to ensure that we're continue to invest in Minnesota. And with this surplus, we have that opportunity. You know, sometimes we think like, what if you just won the lottery and you had a bunch of money? What would you do to enhance your and your family's life? You know, would you put a new roof on the house? Would you tuck money away for the future? What, you know, what is that? Sometimes, you know, having a lot of money is a huge burden, but at other times it definitely can be viewed as an investment. So I think what we really, what I like about what Governor Walls's plan is that it's very intentional about preserving the past, the buildings and the structures and the assets that we have here in Minnesota right now. Often, you know, many of them take a lot of money for upkeep, like our universities and colleges, roads and bridges and other buildings around the state that bring value into a community. So I really love that it's investing in the past, but it's also taking into consideration current needs and really building for a stronger future. So I would look for things that are going to rebuild the safety net that we have in our communities, again, like roads and bridges, fire stations. You know, I sat on state government finance in the House, and we heard a number of times the need for to expand veteran homes, as well as to ensure that they have the services and the infrastructure to care for our veterans as more and more are aging. And so that is, you know, investing in those veteran homes is definitely one of the things that I think is really important. Thinking back, I'm trying to remember now some of the other things that I know there's money in there for climate mitigation, which of course is so important. Just as Representative Feist said, we want to make sure that we leave Minnesota and the earth in better shape than when we found it. And as we say in the Native community, for at least the next 7 generations. So looking at how we can apply funds towards climate mitigation, ensuring housing for sure for our families that are struggling, but also again, veterans and our senior citizens. I know there's money in there for the zoo. I mean, we also have to remember that some of the things that some people think are frivolous or, you know, not something so pertinent, like zoos and libraries. I was a library media specialist. Bruce, you were in library. We know the value in our schools and in our communities. So looking for ways to support the small bills that are unique to communities as well. I know that equity funding is a huge issue, especially with a lot of our nonprofit organizations. And so in the past, the governor has really been intentional about supporting those nonprofit organizations that provide so many wonderful services to our state. And so those are the sort of things that I would really support. In our own district, I think there are 2 things that we'll be carrying or that we'll be working on. I'm working with Representative Bernardy, and one is the Fridley Northtown Rail Yard overpass. It's a bond issue and appropriation of money to connect Central Avenue, is it Central Avenue? University Avenue with the River Road to ease traffic and access resources for those community members. And then there's a proposed bus arterial bus rapid transit line that is proposed, I think from Columbia Heights, Fridley, and Spring Lake Park, right up Central Avenue, which it is a district that I represent. And so I'll be carrying that along with Representative Bernardy. Lots to do.
Okay, all right, and then that leaves us with, oh, I forgot who I next. Senator, God, Representative Bernardy, I'm sorry.
No problem. This is an important investment in our state, and Governor Walz is a champion for creating more jobs and preserving our assets that we have in Minnesota. So it's critical to our state to have a comprehensive bonding bill. And so I support a lot of the things that are in the governor's proposal. And I'll focus, since a lot has been covered in that, I will focus on the part that I'm working hard for our community. So an example of a bonding project that helps our community, for anyone who's been to Springbrook Nature Center, that we have a new nature center facility, and that was a bonding bill that I had for $5 million for our community to be able to build that nature center. And that is an example of how it can help our community. So as Senator Kunesh talked about, the railroad bridge is a local bill, and that one is seen as an equity project to get people to and from through our community to get access to groceries and be able to bike and walk and safely be able to get across our community. And right now, people are walking through the rail yard, and that's not safe. And so anyway, that is something that we are working on, and it's a demonstrated need in the transportation system. And then the other area, which Senator Kunesh talked about, was it's called the F line, and we got funding for it. I've been working on this for a long time. I grew up, my childhood home was in Columbia Heights on 4th Street and in Fridley on 4th Street. And so I remember my mom talking about light rail transit coming to our community. And this was way a few decades ago we talked about this. And so it's been an honor to be able to work and bring this to fruition. And last year we were able to get funding in our transportation bill for a large part of being able to do what's called the F line. And the F line is bus rapid transit, and it will provide frequent service for our community from Minneapolis border in Columbia Heights up Central Avenue to 53rd Avenue, and then go over to University Avenue, and then it will go up to Northtown, and it will be a high quality bus service. And I'm just so excited about that. And we'll work on getting the rest of the dollars to make that happen. But it's in the docket, and we've got some money so far, and we're going to finish that off. And then also working on different things locally, some whistle-free zones, and then sound walls to help make neighborhoods and homes more comfortable. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is I'm also working on 2 other big parts as the higher education chair, making sure that we do asset preservation in our colleges and universities that we have huge investments in. And so we need to make sure that the rain isn't coming into the dorms or to classrooms, and making sure that there's the heat that's needed. And so those are important assets to preserve in our state. And then lastly, I'll just mention is I'm a part of really helping our communities be safer when people move about with their own 2 feet or on some wheels, and biking and walking. And I have a proposal for, last year I was able to get money into, for the first time, for an active transportation fund, which would focus on making biking and walking safe in our communities. And I have a proposal for $50 million. And I'm excited. I'm a part of our climate caucus in the Minnesota House of Representatives. And the climate caucus has joined me in helping get this initiative through, because I've been working on transportation issues for a long time, and my area of emphasis has been safety especially for our most vulnerable users, people who bike and walk, and then equity, making sure that everyone has access to good transportation. And then the other area is the environment. When I first started working on that, they were aspirational goals. Now MnDOT now does performance measures for the climate. And so a lot of these things, and they didn't have an environmental justice plan that was up to date. And so now a lot of these things are happening, and I'm excited to be able to get some more dollars to be able to advance these things. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for that. You touched on some of this, the next question, but I'll add a little something. You mentioned District 41 projects that might be in the bonding bill. And we know that sometimes the bonding bill decisions comes down to the governor and the majority leaders of the House and the Senate. So what are your plans to see that these bills are included concerning District 41 included in the final bill? And I'll start with Sandra Kunesh.
Thank you. I think if I learned anything in my 4 years in the House is the need to really build communication and trust with not only the legislators in my own caucus, but also those across the aisle. I found that I was most successful when I reached out to legislators in the GOP and asked to meet with them, to sit down and explain my legislation and why it's so important and how it affects their constituents as well as my constituents or all of Minnesota. And I was successful. When I was in the House, I passed a number of really good pieces of legislation by going over to the Senate and speaking with GOP senators and asking them to support and carry my bill. And one of them was the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Task Force. There were some others that had to deal with our Indigenous communities. And so I will use that same line of action. It's been very hard as a new senator to build those relationships, especially since last year, many of us did not feel comfortable being in the Capitol. There were folks that were sick and had been sick or were not following CDC guidelines. And so we weren't able to necessarily speak face to face or those sort of things, but that my mode would be to continue to build relationships and help those legislators in both the House and the Senate understand why a bill that I might be carrying or that the governor is carrying is so very important, because it affects not just my constituents, but it also will for all of Minnesota. So for example, if we had that transit bus service, it would move folks from the suburbs in the north into the Twin Cities, the cities area, providing opportunity for economic growth, for housing opportunities. When we think about families trying to reunite after the pandemic, the ability and ease of transportation. Same thing with the bridge that would go over the railroad. I think about if you know that area, there's a elementary school and schools on the River Road. Right now, the buses have to go around either on the freeway or go way up north and then come back down instead of going across the bridge. Same for emergency vehicles. If there's an emergency, this bridge will allow for ease of access. On the other side, on the river side of the bridge, there are low income and housing communities there. And they too don't have access to grocery stores and other services very easily because of where they are. So that bridge will take them right across to to grocery stores and hardware stores and reuse stores, all sorts of opportunities. So this builds our economy, and what we want to do is rebuild our economy, supply our communities with economic development, because that's going to help everybody, not just our little area, but all of Minnesota.
Okay, thank you. And Senator Feist, would you please, oh, well, yeah, Senator Feist, while you're still here.
Yeah, thank you.
Senator, Representative Feist, I'm sorry. Why do I keep saying
I think
I want to give everybody
Bernardy,
promotion.
It might be, I
Let's
just,
just all be senators.
yeah.
For the day, for the day. I'm
If
sorry.
Representative Bernardy wanted to go first, I feel like I went before her in the last question. So
Okay, all right. Representative Bernardy, would you respond?
Yes, during COVID, it's been challenging. You don't get to get out very much. And I had somebody that's was my former legislative assistant just stopped at my house. And so I invited her in, and they're going to be quiet for just a second while I finish this question my husband's talking with her. So this is life, right? My office is in the dining room. So this is getting it actually passed. Well, the exciting part is like Senator Kunesh said that we building relationships is super important, and I'm hopeful. I was able to get the kickoff for the House bonding committee. It was like a 14-day tour across the state. They kicked it off right here in Fridley. That's a good sign, and that was a great start. So that building those relationships and now I don't know if people know this, but I'm like getting higher up in seniority. I'm one of the senior members in the House, and so I'm in a lot of those discussions and serve on the Ways and Means Committee and other committees. So it's super helpful to be able to influence legislation for our community, and that's one of the benefits to be able to do that. And so, but the bottom, can just hold on a second. I got to tell. Okay, so okay, we're getting back here, but so I guess I'll probably have to wrap that up. But I know there's something else that I wanted to say, but it may come back to me. But this is what I was going to say. Before the governor was ever elected to run for office, before I supported him, I actually met with him because I cared so much about the safety of people being able to move about our community, biking and walking, that I met with him to ask him what his commitment was to that. And so that's one thing, I established that relationship before the governor ever ran for office. And I know he's a big biker himself, and I just, those are part of the relationship building and sharing your expectations and what the needs of your community are. So those are just some insider things that help in getting bonding bills passed. And then engaging the community and being huge advocates for the projects is super important. And we have a lot of people behind us helping make this happen. It's a team effort. So thank you.
And now Representative Feist.
Thank you. Just to kind of continuation of what Representative Bernardy was saying is that it really is a community-based effort, it's a collaborative effort. What I wrote down for my answer to talk about was just that we're kind of a conduit. And so I know for the bonding projects that I've advocated for, I've had really productive meetings with like Mary Jo McGuire, the Ramsey County Commissioner, and with Abdullah, City Council member in New Brighton. And then I've not only kind of internalized the information I needed to know and advocate with specificity for these projects, but also are able to connect them, with people where they can provide the information and be persuasive on their own behalf, and provide kind of their own expertise and perspectives that I try to share as best I can, but like also just making those connections is really important. I've like my colleagues have said, building those relationships is really key. I've worked hard to build positive relationships with all of my colleagues, but definitely it's helpful to work closely with Chair Fu Lee, who's in charge of the bonding bill, and the leadership in the House. And so I've worked hard to build those relationships. it's kind of my whole philosophy of life, is that you get ahead if you are like good and you put good into the world and you're supportive and helpful to your colleagues, then like in some ways, oftentimes very indirectly, it comes back. And so it's kind of my philosophy of politics as well. And just one thing I wanted to mention too, in terms of it being a collaborative, community-based approach to the bonding process. One thing that I gleaned from many conversations with a number of people is that we need a community center in Columbia Heights. And that's a really big, long-term, bold type of project that takes a really long time to get from concept to actual funding and an actual thriving community center. But it's something that people came to me with, and they kind of described sort of like stopgap measures that they've taken to create those community spaces and what it would mean to the community to have that space. And so that just gives us the insight and the energy to advocate and to create those coalitions. So this is kind of random, but I promise it's relevant. I was working on a bill that I didn't really understand that well. It was very technical, like creating a definition. And the person I was working with said, "Hey, can you call a meeting?" And I was like, okay, like, I don't quite understand what we're going for. And he's like, no, just ask these people to like come into the room. And it turned out like my role in this process was just to get everyone together, because they needed to talk to one another. And so sometimes that's our interesting role, is like getting the right people in the room together to have those conversations and to make that concrete progress. So I know that's like kind of far afield to the question, but that's just kind of the way I've been thinking about this process, is like short-term relationships, collaboration with the community, and then long-term, how do we get all the people together to make that really bold long-term goal come to life.
Okay, and now for Representative Bernardy to start the next question. What is your opinion of requiring high school students earn educational credit in civics before graduation?
Well, this civics is super important. As you know, our democracy it is very fragile. It's not something that we can take for granted, and making sure that we have engaged communities in our and students and our residents and citizens in our communities is super important. So anyway, what I wanted to say about this is okay, just a second. I have to tell my guests to be quiet. Hold on. Okay. I can't dual task, sorry. So, and I can't concentrate, sorry, yes, okay, so anyway, sorry about that. That's my husband, anyway, and my guest, sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna get back to this because I love this question. I don't know if people know, but in the standards in Minnesota, there's like over 60 different standards that students regarding civics, and they start in kindergarten. And this, one of my that I have been involved is with the National Institute of Civil Discourse, and bringing that to the legislature. That myself and two other legislators, we were on the forefront of this, and now we have a civility caucus and better angels, or I can't remember, the best angels. I can't remember exactly what it's called now, but we've been trying to create relationships and trust among legislators, and I've been to another whole legislature in Idaho, and we led them through this effort. So it takes intention and to build relationships, and it takes intention to make sure that our students have the ability to be engaged from the moment, well, when they're actually serving, as they're growing up. And so that's really cool in our community when the kids go on election day and they vote for their favorite fruit. So there's a lot of initiatives going on, and whatever we can do to support them and make sure that our students are prepared is an important way to do that. And then making sure we're balancing with it, that they have the opportunities to be able to take the classes they need. So there's a lot of proposals, and they all need to be looked at closely. So thank you.
And Representative Feist, would you please respond?
Yeah, so I was in the chat talking. And so the question that we're talking about is like requiring educational credit for civics.
Yes.
Okay, Great. So I love civics, obviously, because I became a politician, and I was a history and political science major in undergrad. And so I definitely agree that it is critically important that students understand our democratic institutions, that they feel like they have a voice in them. That's one of the reasons I'm most excited about my period poverty bill, is that it's been student driven. Like, the students came to us and they said we have a need, and they've also been the ones sharing their very personal stories and talking to the press and advocating to colleagues across the aisle as well on this issue. And so I think, ensuring that students are instilled with a sense of like the system works for us is so critically important. I actually taught civics all day to sixth graders last Thursday, and it was very intense. But awesome. They said I should run for president. So I was like, ooh. But it's interesting to hear the kind of issues that they brought up, a lot of issues around school lunch. That was one thing. They said they would like it to not taste like rotting flesh. I was like, I don't think we can legislate that. They did want me to pass a law that their principal had to eat their food. So I was like, I don't think we can do that either. But ensuring that kids like have this foundational understanding of our systems and feel like they can engage with it and have a voice is critically important. On the very specific proposal, which is one brought by our Republican colleague across the aisle in the House, I'm not sure how I feel about having an actual credit requirement, just because I know the schools have said that it would take away from some other electives, and that we already have our social studies standards that do very much require that kids are educated around civics. So on the very specific proposal, I'm not sure where I stand. I know the schools have concerns, but on the premise behind it, that civics education is critically important and that we do need to make sure that we are preparing our kids to grow up to be engaged citizens, I definitely agree. Thanks.
And Senator Kunesh, would you please respond?
Yes, I will. I started out in the legislature sort of not quite sure that I wanted to make this course a credit, very much along the line that Representative Feist just sort of explained it, because it's embedded. Our government is embedded in our curriculum probably from, I think, third grade on. It's visited and revisited, and it builds upon that knowledge. And I believe that there is also coursework in there's a civics class it's addressed in your freshman year in high school. So as an educator and a former library media specialist, my mantra is knowledge is power. And the more we can expose our students to a broad array of ideas and factual history and understanding cause and effect, the better we will have prepared them to make really informed decisions and participate responsibly in our society. Now, should we expect or require a high school credit for this? There are many ways that I think we could do it. Maybe just completing that 9th grade coursework, taking a test, they pass with flying colors, it's done. There are other ways that we can do it because, as I said, our school curriculums have that study of government at different levels. I just Zoomed with a combined class of elementary students to talk about my role as a legislator a few days ago, and they asked really great questions. But I think that we haven't really given it as much attention as a curriculum or a strand in our educational system, because we had years and years of intense focus on math and reading and science, because that's what our students are tested on. So for so long, teachers have had to teach to those tests, leaving little time to really dig deep into civics and social studies and history. So what I would like to see is it's, you know, the civics course with credits is a great way to remind high school students about their role as a voting adult and participating in decisions in their own communities. But at the same time, I think it's important that we go back to really, you know, with integrity, addressing our social studies and history programs in a better way. I know that within our high schools, we have a program called Youth in Government, which is run by the YMCA. I was a representative in that when I was a high school student, and got to come down to the Capitol in January and go through the roles of being a legislator. And those are the sort of things that I think we could, you know, promote in better ways for the students that want to work in that way. And that would definitely create an opportunity to earn that credit. But I think there are ways that we can do this if that's what folks really want, that credit, just to show that they did it. But I think we need to take a more intentional approach to exposing kids to our civics, social studies, and history.
I think I should disclose that that question came from the State Minnesota League office, so.
I think the league has taken official position supporting that proposal.
Yeah, I do not know, but yeah, they do want us to they do want us to write down your responses to these questions so they know who to push.
Okay.
So anyway, all right, the next question, which I'll ask Representative Feist to lead off with. Do you have any concerns over how the 2022 Minnesota election procedures as they stand now will be carried out? If so, what do you see as being the most important policy change that can improve our electoral process, and why?
Yeah, so I think we're very, very fortunate to be here in the state of Minnesota with our Secretary of State, Steve Simon, who really cares deeply about, are we allowed to say election integrity, or is that like a weird coded buzzword for like the big lie? Anyway, I don't know. Anyway, I know that Secretary of State Steve Simon cares deeply about ensuring that everyone has full access to the ballot. And so that's really reassuring to me. In terms of just one thing that I would have liked to have seen in this election that we saw in 2020 is that it was much easier to participate by mail-in ballot in 2020 than it's going to be this year. You're still allowed to mail absentee, absolutely. But because we were voting at the heart of the pandemic in 2020, there was this really big push through public awareness and just technology to make it very easy to order a ballot and mail it in. And I know that towards election day, that practice was challenged in court by people who didn't want to make it quite so easy to vote. But if we could go back to that approach to ensuring that people who have busy lives, who just like not everybody can go on election day, like Senator Kunesh was saying, we need to make it a national holiday also. Like if I could do one massive thing, that would probably be it. But allowing for mail-in ballots made it a lot easier for a lot more people to participate in our election. And so I would like to see that approach this year as well, if we could.
And Senator Kunesh, do you have any concerns about the 2022 procedures? And is there any one thing that you would like to see to improve the election?
Well, we've already started preparing for that. Precinct caucuses are on Tuesday. I hope everybody has figured out how their unique district is going to be conducting the precinct caucuses. Our district has really been nimble and has done an outstanding job of, well, our DFL caucus of moving to a contactless opportunity to participate. We'll have an online Zoom with the candidates, and then on Tuesday, if you haven't already emailed in your form for not being in person delegate, We have opportunities to drop it off at our chair's house. We have opportunities to drop it off at both the Fridley and Columbia Heights schools, so that they can get their resolutions and their forms in order to participate at the next level of endorsement convention. So I think we've been really good at being able to set that up in a way that allows for everybody to participate. And now, oh, where was I going? Okay, so in Minnesota, you know, we led the nation in voter turnout during the 2020 general elections, with 80% of those eligible voters participating in the election. So I continue to be in favor of automatic voter registration, and I find that would really make it easy to implement automatic voter registration in Minnesota by using information that's collected during any transactions within our governmental agencies, like getting your driver's license, and it just automatically registers those who are eligible. And it would be so easy that when we, you know, if we move from one home to the next or one place to the next, when we go and get our license changed and then go to the polls, we're all set to cast our votes. And this change would definitely bring more eligible voters to the polls. Think about those 18-year-olds that go to get their driver's license at that age and now are automatically registered to vote. And it keeps our voter information better updated. It saves money by making the registration process even more efficient. And as we saw in some of the past elections, those long lines that we saw on election day can go away. So, you know, given that Minnesota has consistently been a national leader in voter turnout and safety, election reform, ballot integrity, automatic voter registration would only enhance and enforce those voting security. And just the one last thing I'm going to say is if we can get money out of politics and have really meaningful campaign reform instead of you know, wasting so much money on ridiculous and defamation in campaigns, it makes things very, very difficult for quite a few of our candidates to really run authentic, honest campaigns. So that's what I would say.
And Representative Bernardy.
Thank you. And as you asked at the beginning, if a lot has already been said, then I don't need to like elaborate on it a lot, but I will add something, two things. One is I'm a part of a group of people who are supporting the Democracy for the People Act, and it would be a bill that would increase access to voting for all Minnesotans. So that is something that we were working on, and I'm hoping that this piece of legislation becomes law this year. And then the other thing, I'm glad that Senator Kunesh brought up about youth in government. That is, if you have any students that are eligible from 8th grade to 12th grade, please get them engaged in youth in government. It's part of the YMCA program, and they take over the Capitol for 4 days. And I've served on the state board and have helped raise money for students to be able to attend here in our own community and across the state. So that is definitely an important opportunity for learning about civics and rolling up your sleeves and really living it. And then there's also the model UN nations that they also do as well. And that is, you know, this that is like critical too. So I know our Fridley School District has engaged in both of those activities. So thank you for everyone who supports that, and get your kids and grandkids involved.
Representative Bernardy, I'm going to ask you to clarify one phrase that you used, and you said all Minnesotans. Now, New York City has changed its election law so that non-citizens can now vote in their city elections. So when you were saying all citizens, all Minnesotans, are you talking about citizens or people who are not citizens and citizens?
Well, thank you for asking that question, because I like to talk about people, Minnesotans as Minnesotans. Sometimes you hear the legislature people talking about citizens and all that thing. I represent I feel like I represent the residents of my community and our state, and that can be no matter what your legal status is. And so when I'm talking about this, I'm talking, what I want to share about with you, because something has changed in the DFL party this year. People who are not eligible to vote in Minnesota are able, and I don't have the exact requirements now, but please feel free to reach out to me, can take part in the DFL caucuses. And so that's starting to expand people that have a voice in government. And that's super important. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but I appreciate you recognizing the difference in the language we use. It does matter. So thanks.
But what about voting? Because you're talking specifically about voting. So do you want them to be do you want only citizens to be able to vote, or would you include residents of Minnesota to vote?
Well, I see Representative Sandra Feist, who is an immigration lawyer, raising her hand, and I'll yield to her for talking about that.
Okay, Representative Feist.
Thank you. As an immigration attorney, I'm like, no. So it's the fact that non-citizens can participate in the endorsement process is wonderful and inclusive and great. I assume that New York City talked with immigration attorneys before they made their decision, but as an immigration attorney, I would tell my clients who are not US citizens that they should not participate in any local, state, or federal elections on the this is like in the weeds bit, but it's public. So I just want to make sure people know the naturalization process does ask if you have ever registered to vote or voted in a local, state, or federal election. And it really could get into this issue of what's called a false claim to citizenship, which is one of the absolute most serious bars to immigration that exists. Like, it's worse than most serious crimes. And so I would just obviously we want to be like Representative Bernardy said, we see ourselves as representing every single person in our community, regardless of their citizenship status. But in terms of whether someone should cast a ballot, that's a really technical, nuanced legal decision. But I will just note, because I'm also an immigration law professor, that in the history of our country, non-citizens have actually voted quite a bit in various local and state elections. And there used to be this hybrid place where you could be like an American in waiting, where you would fill in this form saying, one day when I'm eligible, I will become a citizen, and they could vote. So regular residents couldn't, but if you declared your intention to become a US citizen, you could. And so right now we have laws and kind of politics would say that non-citizens should not vote and cannot vote. But that has not always been the case. And I think that it's important that we think about this issue and not just assume that it should always be like this into the future.
Okay, thank you for those clarifications. Appreciate it. Now I'll go on to a different topic. Some legislators are critical of prosecutorial policies and specific decisions by specific county attorneys. County attorneys are accountable to the voters through elections. Should the legislature enact legislation that affects the policies of county attorneys or leave accountability to the voters? And I'll ask Senator Kunesh to answer first. Was I muted?
Yeah, I was on mute. My dog is barking.
Oh.
We all have stuff going on around us. That's such a really great question. And I wish I had found that question a little bit earlier so that I had time to process that. My dad was actually a county attorney up in Stearns County. And I've been sitting here thinking, what would my dad say? WWDS, how would he react to that? And I think what's important is that he would affirm that, even county attorneys are answerable to their county residents. And so, the question is, should the legislature enact legislation that affects the policies of county attorneys or leave accountability to the voters. I think it's a two-way street. You know, and I'm just saying this off the top of my head because I haven't done the research, and perhaps Representative Feist has a really good background information on this too. But you know, my first thought is that there needs to be some consistency across counties through the county attorney's office. And so, you know, you might get somebody in there with their own agenda, or you might find a county that has, you know, different ideas on how to address some of the issues, and that varies very differently across the state. So I think what we need to do, I would need to do more information finding on this and how it actually works, and what are the issues that seem to be bubbling up that brings this question to mind. You know, I'm sorry, I don't have enough information to make a really solid decision or answer to this, but I do think that that there needs to be some consistency across the way, but then also leave opportunities for unique county attorneys, in unique situations to be able to address those issues within their own county. So sort of that hybrid issue, but I don't think, I think it definitely is something that the legislature should be able to sort of monitor and discuss across the board if there are certain issues that don't seem to be consistent. You know, I can think of a bunch of different examples, but I think I need to have more information on that. So thank you.
Representative Bernardy.
Okay, so Bruce, thanks for the question. And I think this is a great opportunity to get feedback from the public. This is a new question that I have never been asked before or have researched it before. And so what I'm going to ask, if anyone's viewing today and they have ideas about this and share their expertise, but as a legislator, it's really helpful to us to hear from our constituents and what they're thinking, as well as there's a number of professional experts in our communities, and some of them reach out to us and we're able to call them up and ask them for some technical expertise, or we are able to say, can you find this out for us? We also have researchers and we can look into that too. So this is something that I will certainly look into, and I definitely want to hear back from constituents on how they're feeling about that and their ideas. So thanks.
Representative Feist.
Yes, thank you. So, so there definitely is precedent for the legislature having a role in sentencing. Last session, I authored the Veterans Restorative Justice Act, and by authored, I just mean I was the lead author. Brilliant people drafted it and worked on it for many years, but it was the bill that I carried, and it passed into law. And that definitely created some guidelines and guardrails around the sentencing of certain veterans with low-level offenses. And the goal there was to ensure that these veterans received support and interventions that they needed. And then we also, if they successfully completed that process, that restorative path, then the charges against them would be dropped. And we created very strict rules around the sentencing and dismissal of charges for these veterans. So this is something that definitely can exist in the legislature. What this issue is centered on right now, though, is people saying that prosecutors need to be harsher and more punitive, and that is the answer to protecting our public safety. And I could not disagree with that more. Because that is just disproven. A lot of people are pointing to the different kind of styles of prosecutors across the country and the state, and saying that in places where the prosecutors are not punitive enough and harsh enough and like throwing the book at people, that somehow that makes us less safe. But we've seen that, you know, public safety has been impacted by the pandemic, and there are a lot of things that we need to do to support enhance public safety. And I do not believe that more punitive sentencing and creating like pressure and oversight and rules to require prosecutors to be meaner I do not believe that is the answer to protecting public safety. And the bill that I'm working around restorative justice actually, is kind of a step in the opposite direction, but doing what these people would propose, which is, creating some guidance and creating a path so that, when people act out, we're looking at the underlying factors that led to that. When a 12-year-old is involved in a carjacking, it's not because they are a bad kid, it's because they are not getting the support they need. And we as a society need to help them to get that support and to also understand the consequences of their behavior, which is a very key part of restorative justice. It's helping people to understand how the actions that they take impact the people and the community around them. And so I'm all for creating more restorative paths and revisiting our sentencing laws and our procedures and just all of the framework around how we prosecute people. But I think where this question stems from is a place that I don't agree with, which is that if we were just harder on people, that somehow we would all be safer.
Okay. All right, I see that we're getting close to our 90-minute time that we said we were going to spend with you. Thank you very much for your complete answers. We didn't get to all of ours, but as I said at the beginning, those viewers who didn't see their questions asked, you can contact your representatives directly through their offices. Now, we do want to say to you, our legislators, do you have any final comments, especially on a topic you wished we had asked about? And going back to protocol, I'll ask Senator Kunesh to start off.
Well, I can't think of any question that you didn't ask. I wish you would have asked what legislation we are most proud of.
Oh.
I would have loved to have shared some of the things that I've been working on, like the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Task Force. As a result of that, we also created the Missing and Murdered African American Women's Task Force. Our MMIW one was so successful. We knew the natural intersection would allow for would definitely mean that we need to address it within our African American sisters as well. And so, those are the sort of things outside the norm that everybody's always talking about, bonding and public safety and this and that. If we ever give us an opportunity to talk about some of the things that we are personally really passionate about and some things that we're working on outside of the usual realm. But I do appreciate you taking this time and this opportunity to set this up and also to provide not only our conversation here, but the multitude across the state as far as getting to know our legislators and hearing the different viewpoints. And as always, I learn so much from my other legislators when I participate in this way. So again, thank you very much. And folks, don't forget to participate in the precinct caucus on Tuesday.
Representative Bernardy.
Oh, thank you, Bruce, for that opportunity. And I know we have 3 minutes, and so I'm not going to, we can go over a little bit, but I liked how Senator Kunesh approached that about what we're proud of. So I guess I'm most proud of bringing things to our community that really make a difference, like all-day kindergarten and the 4,000 preschool spots that preserve opportunities for our preschoolers, the funding for Springbrook Nature Center, and then also was able to get the first of its kind in the country wetland restoration project happened right here in Fridley at Springbrook Nature Center. So those are just some examples, but that's my favorite thing to do as a legislature, is to help my constituents and whatever they need that relates to government. So it's not all about passing bills and introducing bills, it's about supporting our constituents and their needs. So whether getting them some health insurance that they need, or addressing some problems that they're experiencing that we can help at the state level, that is something that I love to do. So I put my number in the chat earlier, so please reach out and contact us. So, and then this is the other thing, I just wanted to say this because it didn't fit in anywhere in this session, but we represent Senate District 41, And we are one of like 3 or so, maybe 4 now. It might be 3. At last biennium, we were the only one, but we're represented by, and this is a League of Women Voters, so that's why I wanted to share it. We're represented by all women. And that's not very common around the state. And I just want to say what an honor it is to be a part of this team and to represent our communities. So thank you.
Representative Feist.
Yeah, thank you. So they say that we should always answer the question we wish we had been asked, and we got to make that explicit this time. So I guess I would kind of approach this with a hybrid approach, what I'm most proud of and also parting comments. Politics are kind of chaotic and unpredictable and can be really fickle, but my experience in my first session was that the system can work. I was really proud that in my first session, I carried 5 bills that passed into law, and the Veterans Restorative Justice Act, a bill to create uniform timelines around something called the U visa certification process for immigrant victims of serious crimes, and also additional funding for suicide prevention training in our schools. I'm just, it was really informative to me to see that the system can work, that we can work with colleagues across the aisle in a divided legislature. We used to be the only one, now there are 2 with Virginia. But it's a tricky landscape, but my takeaway is that the system can work for our community and for our state. And I've just been really proud, and it's been a joy, and just participating in these events with Mary and Connie. I just don't want SD 41 to go away. So hopefully we just get a new number and it's still us, because it's so great to be so on the same page and to be serving with the 2 of you and to representing this community. So thank you.
Well, Senator Kunesh, Representative Bernardy, Representative Feist, thank you for serving in public office and addressing your constituents through this legislative interview. Viewers, thank you for your informed and active participation in government by viewing this discussion. LWV ABC provides monthly public programs. Check our calendar for each month's topic and other civic events. Their website is lwvabcmn.org. Again, thank you, everyone. Good day.